Welcome to Talk of the Neighborhoods. I'm Joe Heisler, your host, coming to you from the BNN Live studios, Eggleston Square, Jamaica Plain, where tonight on the Boston Neighborhood Network, we continue our coverage of election 2013 with little more than 2 weeks left until the final election. Of course, all eyes have, and all media eyes have been focused on the mayor's race. Of course, the first open mayoral race in some 30 years, at least 20. But tonight, we're turning our gaze, our focus, towards the Boston City Council, which is facing several critical issues in the weeks ahead. And tonight, we'll talk with two of the at-large city council candidates and in the first half hour, and two more in the second half hour in the first of our series of mini debates. And joining us tonight in the first half hour, City Council President Steve Murphy, and one of the challengers, Jeff Ross, is due to join us as well. Then in the second half, Councilor Ayanna Pressley and Jack Kelly, a neighborhood activist from Charlestown, who finished in the top 8. All that and more tonight on Talk of the Neighborhoods. I'm Joe Heisler, your host. Tonight, we kick off our mini debates with the at-large city council candidates. Two this first half hour, two the next. Next week, we'll have 4 more. Of course, with all the attention paid to the mayor's race, it's kind of sucked up the oxygen, so to speak. But the crew of candidates, the top 8 finishers in the preliminary election, very strong field. And tonight, in this first half hour, you meet 2 of them. Joining me on my immediate left, he's currently serving, of course, as the City Council President, Steve Murphy, running for re-election.
See you, Joe.
And nice to have you here. And also from the South End, longtime activist, Jeff Ross.
Good to see you. Thank you for having me, Joe. Appreciate
both
it.
of you did very well in the preliminary election, despite the lack of attention. And I want to start out tonight, how difficult, how have you managed to kind of get your message out despite all the focus on the mayor's race?
Targeted mailings. And we've been, and I've run into Jeff. Jeff's a good guy. He's a Democratic State Committeeman and a friend of mine for years. We've run into each other in every corner of the city all for the last several months. Even though the mass media isn't paying attention, people have been meeting us in their neighborhoods, in their homes, in their places of business for the past several months. And so we're getting some notice. It might not be widespread, but we're playing to critical acclaim, street by street, neighborhood by neighborhood, house by house.
Right. Jeff, how have you found it? Of course, running against there's only 2 incumbents in this race, so
Sure.
It makes it for a little different dynamic. But how have you managed to get your message across?
Well, we ran a citywide campaign. I think if you look at the electoral results, it's my first time running at large, right. And it was great to be out there with folks like Steve Murphy on the campaign trail. We ran a citywide campaign. We performed equally well in every neighborhood across the city. And, we just reached out to community activists and went to as many community meetings as we could. We covered a lot of ground. For us, it was a field game because there wasn't a lot of media attention for the 19 candidates. It was a massive field, and I think there was only one debate when we were all actually up on the stage together.
You got about
45 seconds.
Yeah, so just shaking as many hands as
Here's
possible.
your chance tonight. Help us, because of course these interviews are played, repeated. We're live tonight, but what makes you different than the other 7 candidates in the at-large field and makes you unique that voters should pick you up?
Well, if I get elected to the city council, I'll be the first openly gay citywide councilor ever in the city's history. The recent polls are showing us moving up into 5th place. We finished 6th in the preliminary. My campaign's about uplifting the impoverished families of the city of Boston and breaking down barriers across the city of Boston. I come from a racially, a biracial family. My children are biracial, and a family that is where there are different economic income levels. And so I've had to bridge those gaps in my own family, and it's been my life's passion and work to be out there working to do that across the city of Boston. And I think that message has really resonated with people. I want to see folks I want to see the city's money invested in local banks, the reserve deposits, and banks that do business in the city of Boston. You're going to tell me you voted on it today in the city of Boston, and I know it's coming up. And the reserve deposits create access to capital and lending for small businesses. I'm a small business owner, and I think that we can create vitality in each neighborhood with that.
Connecting, though, you're feeling good about it?
Yeah, I feel good. I mean, the voters, September 25th.
Wasn't so long ago. Well, not that you couldn't say that you were openly gay. I'm not sure anybody cares anymore. But does that still?
I was bullied as a kid, and I had to. When I was on the playground, I had to be in the cafeteria, and I learned to cook and bake. And I entered a cake baking contest the next year and won first prize. And folks say I've built a resiliency that I think will, serve the voters and the residents of the city of Boston well, because it's a tough place up there, especially in times like this when we're looking at the BPPA contract. And
Steve, and I want to ask you about that in just a minute, but you ran, obviously, this is now what term you're running for? Ninth term, and you've been the council president now the last 3 years. Why come back? Why run again? What do you have to prove at this point?
I think that it's an exciting year to be out in the neighborhoods with Jeff and myself and the other candidates, but we're in a critical time for the city, and we've had an economic downturn over the last several years in our city because of the 13 elected members of the city council and the mayor partnering have managed to stay solvent when other cities like Detroit and Providence closer have had their money troubles. And I've always been the person in my career as kind of the budget person on the city council. I had my own business. I was in the private sector for 10 years. I've been on the city council for 17. I learned the public side of budgets up in the state senate as a budget analyst up there. And I brought that to bear, brought fruit to bear for every neighborhood and every resident of the city in my role as a city councilor. And I'm just simply saying, hey, look, we've got a lot of activity. It's an exciting time. There's going to be a minimum of 4 new councilors. Let's keep a steady hand on the tiller in there. Let's keep someone who knows how to maneuver in the building and knows how to use the strengths of the office and my own financial expertise to put it to good use. Keep it working for people.
Well, here's your first question, and we'll come back around to you. Of course, the police arbitration award, the contract award, the estimate that the city's finance officials have put on it, potentially $87 million. Can we afford it? Are you going to vote for it? Would you vote for it? Let's start with you, Steve.
Can we afford it? Well, we're doing the due diligence right now to get the answer. It doesn't help the city when we find out in the arbitration hearing that they put down a document that says they have $512 million in reserves lying around, and that there's no question that they can afford it by their own testimony in front of an arbitrator. So that question's been asked and answered in the arbitration.
That the city has?
The city in their own testimony and documents.
Yeah.
It's the first time I've seen the number 512 million. Usually we have a report from the CFO of the city saying you've got $140 million in surplus. We're going to spend $20 million this year to balance the budget. So right now we're doing our due diligence. We're getting to the bottom of how much we have, how much is available. I think, given what people have gone through in the last years, 25% is a high number.
I think
if it's 80 million or 87 million or 85 million, it's a high number. And given the fact that the other unions all took 12% over 6 years, it's out of whack with everything else.
At this point, could you vote for it?
I don't know yet. I want to do the job that I'm right now engaged in doing, and that's getting to the bottom of it and coming up with an intelligent answer after we've looked at every variable.
Jeff, I'm sure you were at the hearing as well. What's your
Yeah.
take on it? Could you vote for it?
I came out publicly last week saying that I would vote to send it back to arbitration, and I know that I appreciate the work that our folks do out there and put their lives on the line every day. Our officers do great work, and I believe that we need to give our forces a raise. However, I think that we can't have an increase of 25%, 25.4%. It sets a new baseline and a standard. Other unions took much less in the past, and I think that it's unfair to other unions. I think that it costs the city too much money. The CFO testified at the city council hearing that the city has a $30 million deficit and that this would add $13 million to that deficit. I think taxpayers across the city should be up in arms and call the city council to have a vote. Some folks have been out there running on transparency and accountability. This is the opportunity for the city council to show their cards before we get to the election on November 5th.
It sounds like the numbers that are coming out of City Hall, not your end of the fifth floor, but the other end, are somewhat, are they playing fast and loose with the numbers here?
We wouldn't be here if they didn't play fast and loose, and that's part of the problem. Arbitration, the city goes into a second arbitration in a 4-year period, and they're bound by the result. And if I'm the mayor of Boston, I'm going to control the result and not have a third party bind me to something that could be outrageous or outlandish. And it just seems to me there's a lack of being candid when you say, okay, we'll go to arbitration, and then you think you got the city council in the back pocket to cancel out the arbitration if you lose,
Well, and of course, Marty Walsh has suggested that, the mayor didn't mistook or made a misstep here in terms of even agreeing to go into arbitration, and that it put the city in a bad spot. Jeff, you believe that? Do you agree with that?
I mean, we can look back and guess about what happened, but I think we just have to continue looking forward and look at how to move this process forward. And I'd like to see where each of the councilors are on this position and where they're leaning towards voting before the election. I think that
vote
it's an important
before
impact.
the election, Steve.
Yeah.
Will you get to
we'll vote
presiding officer
when the time is right to vote.
Yeah.
And
so no commitment necessarily to vote before the election.
We're doing due diligence. We're going to have a second hearing Wednesday on the matter. We've already had right out of the gate, 72 hours after we were handed the decision, we had a public hearing, a 3.5-hour public hearing. We're having a second hearing because the administration, not the police union, didn't answer the questions that the council asked of it. So we're having a second hearing this Wednesday. It's not like people are sitting around on their hands waiting for election day. I don't want that to be miscast here.
And I don't mean to cast it in that light.
Well, I'm sure.
So many people ran on transparency.
We've got a few things we want to get through here. The casino vote. Were you shocked as everybody else that the Gaming Commission knocked Caesars out of the box? Does that spell the end? Does that change how you look at the potential of a casino in East Boston at Suffolk Downs?
Well,
Steve?
For me, first of all, I hope it doesn't spell the end because, Suffolk Downs was the better of the Eastern Mass places.
Right.
Better than Everett, better than down southwest of Boston. Milford. I kept thinking Foxborough, but Foxborough said no. Suffolk Downs had the best venue to put this forward. The city stands to gain anywhere between $30 and $50 million in additional revenue if Suffolk Downs is chosen. If Everett is chosen, we get zero. And for most people that live in the city, their house is actually closer to Everett than it is to the Suffolk Downs site. So for me, it's an easy choice that Suffolk Downs should happen.
So go forward regardless of whether Caesars is part of it. Go forward with the vote? Well, I understand the Secretary of State said today that the vote must go forward no matter what.
Well, we've already printed the ballots.
Jeff, change how you look at this?
Go forward with the vote. Let's see where voters are on it, and let's have a referendum.
Supportive of a casino on Suffolk Downs?
I think that if we're going to have a casino, I don't think that the casino in Everett is going to have any less of an impact on this economy of the city of Boston. So I think we have to really carefully balance those concerns out. I think what I look at when I think about it is the $250 million projected transportation and infrastructure costs that were out a couple of years ago, and now we're looking at a potential $40 million. I think that we as taxpayers and the city of Boston and the state are going to have to bear that burden, so I want to make sure that if we do go through this process again, that's one of the issues that looked at. I'm a small business owner. I know that there are concerns if we have to, if another casino steps in, what terms would be changed and whether or not there would be some protections for small businesses in East Boston particularly, and venues within the new site for small business.
Okay, I'm going to run through a bunch of questions real quick. We've got about 5 minutes, and of course, you're used to this, 45 seconds, right, from the preliminary election. What would you do with the BRA? Both the candidates have talked about changing the BRA.
There's nothing the city council can do with the BRA. It's a mayoral thing. I mean, we've been talking about it for about 10 years in every city council race. There was a woman, Shirley Kressel, who wanted a job at the BRA years ago, didn't get one, and then went on a crusade against the BRA for years. And she had every neighborhood group in the city saying, "You got to change the BRA." The BRA, to its own fault, develops before they plan. So that needs to be changed. But the only way you can do it is through a home rule petition, which needs the signature of the mayor. So you've got a good time with 2 new people running for mayor to get them both on board.
Jeff, what would you do?
I mean, I would support changes to the BRA. I mean, clearly we'd have to see what the dynamics were. I think some of the ideas that have been out there, and I understand that it does need the mayor's signature, but I think some of the ideas out there around the, planning process, I'd like to see the BRA board with term limits and confirmed by the Boston City Council. I would also like to see a neighborhood-driven process around development. Each neighborhood seems to, and they do have specific wants and needs in the development process. So rather than a master plan, I'd like to see a community sort of driven, regionalized plan on zoning, licensing, and the types of development that each neighborhood wants. Some neighborhoods in the city need much more development than others.
Should the next police commissioner be a person of color to add credibility to those neighborhood residents who've been calling, and officers been calling for more?
I support a nation or worldwide search for a new police commissioner. I think that we need to look within Boston first. I support Boston jobs for Boston residents, so I'd like to see the search conducted, but strongly consider candidates in Boston. But we need to apply the same criteria.
Must it be a person
I think we
of
apply
color?
the same criteria across the board and look at each candidate objectively. I think that what I'd like to see in the new police commissioner is, somebody who trains and mentors leadership, that and also the school superintendent. So preference-wise, I don't think it could.
Steve Mamleo has the Massachusetts Association of Minority Law Enforcement Officers has been sharply critical of Commissioner Davis, suggesting that there needs to be more people of color on the force in command positions to be credible.
The command staff should reflect the population of the city. As far as the police commissioner, that's the mayor's pick. It's the mayor's choice. Every commissioner is the choice of the mayor. Again, you'd leave it up to the people running for mayor. Who are they going to pick? You ask that question. City council doesn't have a lot to say on the matter.
Do you support no car or no parking developments, new developments that don't require parking?
Well, one of the things I'm a big supporter of is transit-oriented development. We're doing the Fairmount Indigo line right by my house, and we've got housing going up right at MBTA stations, so there is less of a need for a vehicle. In terms of a blanket policy of no car, downtown neighborhoods, that might be a good idea, but out in Southwest Boston, maybe not.
I support transit-oriented development as well. I'd like to see, markets and transportation and housing sort of developed in the same area.
Talking about the North End, though, no parking.
I live in a neighborhood where there's no parking. I think that we've got to include parking when we do development, but we need to encourage people to use public transportation, of course, and be environmentally friendly and look for clean energy types of transportation, like the bike system that City Council did. I think that's great.
Last question. Do we change the closing hours of bars and increase the number of liquor establishments? We coming out of the era of blue laws. Of course, there's been suggestions to increase the number of liquor licenses. And during the course of this campaign, many people suggested, we need to change how we do this in order to keep young people here that want to be here and want entertainment. Agree?
Waterfront, I think that there are places where we can extend licenses and operating hours, and I think that you have other neighborhoods where you have to go through a community process. If it's a dense residential neighborhood, we want folks to be able to enjoy the quiet of their homes. But I think that we need to look for areas in the city where we can create that type of vitality late night. Of course, we'd have to partner with the state and get the resources to extend the transportation, the late night buses and whatnot. But I think that it's a direction that we should consider moving in for sure.
Steve, get rid of those blue laws. Those are, I don't know.
They've been around
I don't even know if those are blue laws, are they?
They were, and Councilor Ayanna Pressley is leading an effort to allow the city to be in charge of its own liquor licenses and how many we have, and not have to go hat in hand to the legislature. And I've been supportive of her efforts in that. And she correctly points out that every business district is strangled by the lack of restaurants, and restaurants are more successful when you have liquor going with your meal. And so it's about time the nanny state kind of let the city of Boston run its own show.
Well, we shall see. Guys, I want to thank you both for coming. We got about 30 seconds each. Want to give a final pitch, look right into the camera.
Yeah,
And start. Jeff,
I just wanted to mention, rolling back a little bit, that I do support, encourage diversity within school departments and, the firefighter and police departments, that they do reflect the diversity of our city. I don't think that that should be the primary criteria that we use, but we need to make sure that that is definitely considered. I came here 20 years ago with a small bag of belongings and a pair of jeans. I was the first in my family to graduate from college, and there were times my mom worked for minimum wage. I understand what it's like to struggle in this city, and I understand what it's like over 20 years to see the cost of living increase, and we need to look for ways to continue to keep the city affordable, and keep folks that are born and grown up in the city here, and retain some of the talent that comes here. So that's what my campaign's all about, and I thank you for the opportunity to be here.
No problem. Thank you. Jeff Ross and Steve Murphy, you get the final word.
Thank you for the opportunity, Joe. It's always good to be with you. I just simply say that I've lived my whole life in the city of Boston, and for the last 17 years, I've given my best efforts. And my colleagues give their best efforts to the job. People go in there and they do the best they can, working together with our mayor. And Boston shows it. It shows that people have been working together, and we're a city that works. Our best days are in front of us, and I'm going to use my experience, my expertise in budgets, as I have for the last 17 years, to continue to make a difference for taxpayers. And I'm saying, in this year of great change, let's keep some stability on the financial rudder of the city. I'm there, I'm willing to do it, and I'm hoping people will support me. Thank you.
I want to wish you both luck.
Thank
Jeff
you.
Ross.
Thank you.
Steve Murphy, thank you both for coming.
Good to see you.
When we return, we'll have two more candidates running at large. Of course, again, the top four in the final election will be elected. And in the second half, joining us, Councilor Ayanna Pressley and a newcomer running for the first time, Jack Kelly from Charlestown. I'm Joe Heisler, your host, and in this second half, more of the same, more at-large city council candidates, and another mini debate. This time, joining us, another at-large councilor incumbent. She finished first in the preliminary. Ayanna Pressley joins us, and Councilor, nice to have you here.
Thank you for
And
having us.
another candidate who did very well in the preliminary, I think surprised some people. I think that's fair to say, from Charlestown. Jack Kelly joins us. Nice
Pleasure.
to have you here
Nice
as
to be on
well. Let me start out the same way I started with it first. It's like, how do you get through with all this media clutter, all they people want to talk about the mayor's race? How do you get your message through, or is it getting lost?
Well, obviously the mayor's race is dominating a brunt of the political oxygen, and so we appreciate your interest in your coverage of this important race. And really what I've just been reminding people is that, whoever you're supporting for mayor, they'll need partners and allies on that council. And it's also very important that the council be a partner and work with the mayor, not for them. And that means that the council has to continue to be a checks and balance and be independent. And so just consider yourself to be sort of intentionally building a team, if you will. And I find that does get people to sort of shift and to focus more on the council race.
Well, and Jack, you're a first-time candidate, or at least first time at large, I should say.
First-time candidate.
And you surprised? I mean, you stepped in the middle of a maelstrom here, in a sense. All anybody's talking about, of course, is increasing interest in the city, but is your message getting lost? And what is your message?
It's a good question. I think mayor's race does take up all the oxygen, and I think getting into it, certainly people are more focused on that, as you can make the case maybe they should be. I think my message is not getting lost per se, because we're in the finals and we did really well, because of the stuff that we've been talking about, integrating neighborhoods with a message of healthy neighborhoods and how that migrates into other specific things like the school issue, which is a huge issue in not only our race but in the mayor's race. This is something that a lot of people talk about, and as Ayanna can attest to this, as she has shown through leadership and a lot of the advocacy she's done on the city council, you can actually do a lot within advocacy in the city council using your bully pulpit to talk about these issues. The school issue is a big issue. I talk about the school issue from a perspective that we need healthy neighborhoods to make sure that our school system continues to improve. If we don't have healthy neighborhoods, it's going to be continuously an issue to get neighborhoods, schools, or not neighborhood schools, but schools in general, to a point where we want them to be, where they can serve all children throughout Boston. And Ayanna's proven you can do that.
Some question, especially in the context of what's the police contract arbitration award that just came down, what exactly the city is going to be able to afford. Of course, depending upon who you talk to, it's a slightly different price tag, but the suggestion is it could cost the city an additional $80 million. Might affect schools, might affect lots of services. Ayanna, you're sitting there. You're in the hot seat, so to speak. Should the council support that? And how are you dealing with that? Can we afford it?
Well, I mean, I'm approaching that in the way that I approach, every issue before our body. To first operate from a place of, what is within our fiscal, sort of health. What is affordable and what is sustainable. And that is my charge as a city councilor for every decision that comes before that body. And so, myself and a number of my colleagues remain undecided and are waiting for
a little bit uncomfortable spot.
No, it's not. This is what we signed up for. Yeah. This is our job. But again, folks have been in this process for 2 years in negotiations. We're only just now, having the two arguments presented to us. Myself and many of my colleagues have asked for some additional numbers. We're waiting for the arbitrator's rationale. That's an official part of this process. And there should be a process, and it should be a deliberate process. We want to make sure that, I want to make sure that every decision that I'm making is one that is thoughtful and is fully informed and considers the fiscal health of our city.
The Globe said today in an editorial that the council should vote before the election so that voters can get a sense. Do you agree with that?
Sure.
Do you think
Why not?
Think there will be a vote before the election on that?
I don't know whether or not there will be, but I certainly wouldn't be opposed to that. I don't know why not.
Yeah. Jack, how are you feeling about that? Can the city afford it? Would you support the police arbitrators award?
I would, and for me right now it's about process. I don't, well, because I don't think that we can establish, we already seen it with the firefighters contract and we now are seeing it with this. I don't want to establish a process based on the legislator's law. I think it was in 1987 that was passed, that this town councils and city councils are sort of a backdrop to stop a lot of these contracts that come through that the city can't afford it. I mean, the intent of that law, when I've looked back at it, is for catastrophic budget decisions so the city council can stop that. Does this fit the intent of that law? I don't think it does. And I don't think that we can simply sit here every time a contract that is not liked by certain people throughout the city for legitimate reasons, that it just comes back to the city council with only 2 weeks of preparation and saying, okay, well, we're going to vote against it or yes, or we're going to go vote for it. I don't think that we should be establishing a criteria or a precedent that happens. I think that these contracts need to be addressed before they get to this part. The firefighters contract, you could make the case maybe fit that criteria, and that's why it went there. But we can't have a process now that every union contract that comes up comes back to the city council with 2 weeks of
I would agree.
preparation.
The process is really broken. This is not, for anyone a debate over whether or not, or whether or not our public safety officials deserve a raise. Of course they do. It's about, at what amount,
Right.
and can we afford it? But the system is broken. As a city councilor, it's my job to ratify contracts, but I don't have the power or the place with which to negotiate them. So these things are
So it
happening.
puts you in a tough spot.
Exactly, and I would also just like to raise something that I don't think is being given enough attention, and again, it speaks to how broken the system is that we're creating a two-tiered system. There are public employees don't even have the right to arbitration, and so we have some 30 union contracts that have already been ratified, and they don't even have the right to arbitration. And so as someone whose work is all about breaking cycles of poverty, I'm very concerned about the wealth inequities that we continue to perpetuate.
Well, and not to belabor this point, but is there, who says that police and firefighters must be the same pay? Do you agree with that? Should they? Do they? Must there be parity?
Well, I don't think police and firefighters have ever had an exact amount where they're getting paid the same, and I don't think the case is being made, at least the way that I see it, that people are saying that they should be paid the same. I know that when you talk to individual firefighters and some cops, yeah, they'll sometimes go at each other and say, well, you get paid more than we do, and vice versa. But I think in a broad perspective, I don't think that needs to be completely the same, but I think there is an issue of fairness, and I think that, look, they have very difficult jobs, and as much as, we can sit here and when it comes to budget time, sort of look at a lot of the negative components of it, at the same time, they do run into buildings, right? When we're talking about firefighters and cops, are dealing with a lot of the issues that me and Ayanna are talking about, which is poverty, violence, substance abuse. The cops are on the front lines of this most times because the first phone call is 911. I want to be in a place where we can bring the cops, even from a philosophical standpoint, into that discussion why I'm running, which is to combat a lot of those issues. And if we combat some of those issues, well, maybe we do decrease a lot of the problems of violence and substance abuse of why we need cops in the first place.
Well, and raised an interesting point here. If we go back to, of course, the contract that many people say is broken is the firefighters' contract because, of course, the number of fires that they respond to has been reduced dramatically, large part due to sprinklers, all the other improvements that have been made, and that somehow that's the wrong contract to be using to hold up as a standard that everybody else wants to come up to.
Well,
broken?
Again, the system is broken, and we'll continue to have this challenge in defining what truly is parity. But again, the system is broken, and so I hope that we can get to a place where we can see real reform there. But again, the part of this debate that I think is missing is that we're creating a two-tiered system, and I'm very concerned about that with our public employees versus our public safety employees.
Joe, I'd like to add one thing that I've talked about too. Let's say if it was hotel workers, right? Where I think even most people who consider themselves progressive, even people that don't think that, okay, they probably should be paid a little better. What if we continue down a slippery slope of continuous override a lot of these arbitration decisions? And let's say some hotel company that is a Fortune 500 company that makes a lot of money, and we'll take a decision that we make and we'll cite the consistency of what we continue to make it, and then in a private situation, rule against people like hotel workers. And my concern with that is if we continue to just be a backdrop of this where we take an arbitrator's decision, which is something which is the rules of the game that we have set in place, the mayor and labor has gone into an agreement with the option of going to arbitration. If we continue to weaken that system, in my opinion, from where I come from, that's something that I don't want to be in favor of. It's not something that I'm ever going to stand up and be okay with weakening collective bargaining. And I think, in my opinion, historically, if you see any cases like this, it can actually do that. So to me, it's much broader than these particular cases that we're talking about.
There's something to be said for this, and I want to bring you into this as well. But there's some suggestion that, and some of the criticism that's gone towards Marty Walsh is he's too sympathetic towards labor. That labor unions have too much influence in this city. Ayanna, what's your take on that?
Well, of course, I believe fundamentally in the power and respect organized labor. It's necessary. We want to make sure that folks have health care and fair wages and jobs with dignity. So, of course, I support organized labor.
you know, and you enjoy their support as well, Jack. You
I'd like
you're
to.
not you don't shy away from that.
I try not to
as
shy
a
away
labor
from it.
as a labor
but
candidate.
can I just say, but this
Yeah,
is the problem, is that, you know, again, the discourse is so incredibly polarizing, and so everything boils down to this very one-dimensional, are you
true.
for us, are you against us? And it's really not fair. You know, who does not support the brave men and women that are firefighters and are on our police force? Of course we do. Of course, you know, they deserve, you know, to be compensated according to the fact that they're risking their lives. But at what rate? I have an obligation to also make sure that their family and their neighborhood, when there are other city services that they need, that those services are not going to be compromised. So, you know, to me, this is bigger than sort of unions. This is about, you know, fairness and justice, and this is about working families.
Well, and don't get me wrong, I'm playing a little devil's advocate here tonight.
Well,
with you
indeed you are. Indeed you are, indeed you are, but that's okay. You know, there's no shrinking violets up here, so
I
you know,
know.
so we can handle it. But there's many gradations to these issues, Joe. And again, this is the problem: is that everything boils down to a very polarizing discourse. Or are you on the side of the workers or business? Or are you on the side of landlords or renters? Or are you on the side? You know,
it's not that clear.
And it's not that clear. You know, so either way, you're seen as acquiescing.
Let's talk a little bit about your message, your campaigns.
Yes.
And tell me, Jack, because especially you're a first-time candidate, what makes you different from the other candidates in the race that voters should really give you a long, hard look and give you a vote?
Well, I don't know this specifically, so if I'm wrong, I apologize to anyone who's ever ran, but I probably am the only candidate to talk openly and put on their literature that they are a recovering heroin addict. I think that alone, in some ways, is sort of interesting or different or unique, whatever word you want to use. And I don't do that for any other reason than to highlight the fact that there is an element in Boston currently, as we speak, that people deal with real issues. Boston is the greatest city, in my opinion, on the planet. Economically speaking, we are thriving, comparatively speaking, to other cities. However, there is a large portion of Boston that is not in that economic equity, which is not. And so my concern, there is two Bostons, and there's issues of poverty, there's issues of substance abuse, and there's also issues of violence that are happening today, right now. And Ayanna worked on them brilliantly throughout her career on the city council. And I sort of see some of the things that she talks about, and I see it very reflective in why I'm running, and sort of gives me sort of the hope to talk about a lot of these issues that aren't comfortable for a lot of people. This is not something that a lot of people want to talk about. And people that maybe feel that they're not related to it, I would like to counter that actually this is.
You know, some people don't trust people that have a drug problem.
That's true.
Again,
That's fine. No, that's why I'm talking about this. I want people throughout Boston to see me, someone who has turned their life around, someone that is wearing a suit, someone that has worked for Mayor Menino, someone that was a delegate for Barack Obama in 2008, a historic moment in America, when that same kid who was the grandson of someone who was a POW in Germany was now sitting there for the first African-American president, was also someone that was in a gutter at one point and was living on the streets because of an addiction to heroin and OxyContin before that. And so I want people to see that that particular individual that you see in the street that's roaming around like a zombie in our neighborhoods can turn their life around. Okay, people need to see that because people don't look at me like that. I'm very trusted. I was a neighborhood liaison. People seen me. They came to me with constituent issues. I was always there helping people, but they never seen that side of me. So by me putting that out there, I can change the conversation. And whether I win or lose or not, I've already won. And I've won for something that is much bigger than myself, a concept that's greater than me. And I've learned from historical figures in the past, and I'm not putting myself in that category, that you can change the nature of how people view things by actually putting it out there yourself.
Absolutely, and I commend, thank you very much for having the courage to share your story.
Thank you.
Your story, sadly, is one that has been normalized. That was your story, but you don't have the monopoly on that struggle.
That's true.
But I'm so glad that you told that story because, it's issues like substance abuse and addiction, issues that I work on, like teen pregnancy and human trafficking and domestic violence and sexual violence, issues that people have a tendency to silo and marginalize and to not really appreciate that. These social ills do not discriminate. These issues are really neighborhood transcendent. And without a concerted, comprehensive, holistic approach to combating these issues, poverty, violence in all forms, reducing trauma, the bonds of community are broken and it erodes at the fabric of us. And that's everyone's problem in all 22 neighborhoods that I represent and that Jack is running to represent.
Well, and can you, in fairness, though, given your roles, how much can you change that? I mean, and I'm not saying that you can't. And
What?
Yeah.
Come on,
Are you
I'll
kidding me? Okay, so
Is it just the power of the bully pulpit, though?
Is it just? That is very powerful. But no, it isn't just that. Obviously we have, many tools within our toolkit. We can author home rule petitions, which I have, to reform the state liquor license laws and to, change an antiquated law that is hurting small business in our neighborhoods. So we can file resolutions, which I did, to see the first anti-human trafficking legislation passed in our legislature. We can file hearing orders, which ultimately can inform policy, as I did with the comprehensive sex and health education curriculum. So it isn't just the bully pulpit. We have ordinances that we can author, hearing orders that we can file, resolutions we can write. I think what I've demonstrated is that this is not an ineffectual body, that there are a set of issues that I've championed, and through my strength of advocacy, that I've brought a different perspective, that previously those issues were being woefully ignored, and it was to the detriment of us all. Big issues like poverty and violence and trauma that people said were not the business of the city council, that they weren't relevant, that the residents in the city didn't care about them, and you couldn't win elections on those issues. And we have proven that wrong, and it's a mandate by this city in my first and second election, and I hope to earn their vote for a third, that issues fighting for women and girls, breaking cycles of poverty and violence, and reducing trauma in our communities, that agenda has resonated because it is relevant.
Has it? Are you getting
I'm
through?
actually going to jump.
And has your message got through? We've got just a minute or so left.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in real quick, just back to that question. Something that Councilor Pressley did with the work that she's done with sexual health in Boston Public Schools, something that I just assumed we have already did because we're a progressive city, at least I think. She helped champion that. So that particular issue itself is revolutionary because it changes people, it reduces pregnancies, which are then going to reduce needs for people to go into gangs and to get into substance abuse and other mental health issues. They're going to go to school because they're not getting pregnant at an age that they can't handle it. So I would say that it is a very effectual body if you have the right people on there doing some of the work.
Boy, I really picked something. And we've got just a minute or so left. I'm teasing.
That's okay. It's all good.
Just a minute or so left. Look at the camera. You got 30 seconds or so. Give your final pitch.
Thank you, Joe, and thank you, Councilor Pressley, for allowing me to be part of the democratic process. This is an amazing time as a kid who's grown up in Boston. I've been able to be in this historic time where we are picking a new mayor for the first time in 20 years. And I am just so grateful to have the opportunity to ask for one of your 4 votes. And I hope that I've earned it with my message of talking about issues that are bigger than issues that are just reflective on one people, but they also reflect into other parts of our society, like schools, development, and keeping families in Boston. The issues that I'm talking about are issues that are speaking for people who need a voice, and I can be that voice.
Jack Kelly and, of course, Councilor Ayanna Pressley.
All right. Well, good evening. Thank you for your civic engagement by watching this show this evening. It's been my honor. My name is Ayanna Pressley, to serve as one of your 4 at-large Boston City Councilors for the last 4 years. I'm pursuing a 3rd term on the Boston City Council. I hope you will honor me with one of your 4 votes. In my time on the council, I've been fighting for women and girls to break cycles of poverty and violence and to reduce trauma in our communities. I know this is an agenda that is needed, that is relevant, and that when not addressed, that these are issues that really do break the bonds of community and erode at the fabric of us. You've been doing your part in your respective neighborhoods and in all the roles that you play to make Boston great, and I'd like to keep doing my part.
Again, Councilor Ayanna Pressley and Jack Kelly, thank you both for coming in and joining us.
Thank you, Councilor.
Appreciate it, Councilor. Nice to have you here. Again, you're watching Talking to Neighbors here on the Boston Neighborhood Network. We're here tonight and every Monday night at the same time. We will be back next week with the other 4 at-large council candidates, and we hope you'll join us at that time. Until then, for the entire staff and crew here at BNN, thanks for watching. Have a pleasant evening.